The question is that the amendment be agreed to, and I call the honourable member for Richmond.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker, and I'm very proud to be speaking on the National Disability Insurance Scheme Amendment Bill, getting the NDIS back on track. This important bill is designed to implement the transformative recommendations outlined in the final report of the review of the NDIS. And the government's proposing a series of amendments to the NDIS legislation referred to as getting the NDIS back on track. That's exactly what it's doing. And this has been a big issue in my community, as it has been in many members throughout the House, in terms of speaking with local participants and also providers as well. And we have listened and acted. And these amendments are needed so that governments working with the disability community can really improve the scheme. And the bill represents this profound commitment by our government, the Albanese Labor government, to recalibrate the trajectory of the National Disability Insurance Scheme, and all with the overarching aim of reinstating its original ethos and significantly enhancing the experience of its participants. The bill will usher in a new era of NDIS reforms that ensure the scheme can continue to provide life-changing outcomes for future generations of Australians with disability and for those that are in the NDIS now, and whilst also ensuring that every dollar in the scheme gets to the participants for whom the scheme was designed. It will also bolster the powers of the NDIS Quality and Safeguards Commission to protect participants from illegal and unethical conduct. Now, during the election campaign, we announced a commitment to a complete review of the NDIS that would be conducted by independent experts and timed to coincide with the 10-year anniversary of the inception of the scheme in 2013. And the launch date of the NDIS review was brought forward by a year after we were sworn into government. We were able to examine the urgent need for the repair to the scheme. We understood how urgent that was. And in October 2022, the Minister for the NDIS initiated the evaluation of the NDIS in order to improve the framework of the NDIS and essentially to rebuild trust, confidence and pride in the scheme, because it is such a vitally important scheme. And as a fundamental election commitment of the Albanese Labor government, the NDIS review really addressed head-on, the needs for repair after what can only be described as a decade of neglect under the previous Liberals and Nationals government. Now, led by an independent review panel, the review involved extensive consultation with the Australian community. This consultation encompassed over 10,000 contributions and nearly 4,000 submissions from individuals, families, carers and disability representative organisations. And the culmination of this inclusive process was the unveiling of the final report on the 7th of December 2023, with 26 recommendations and 139 supporting actions, all crafted to steer the NDIS towards its full potential. Crucially, the panel absolutely ensured the voices of participants were not merely acknowledged but actively incorporated into the fabric of the NDIS review. Through consultations and many stakeholder engagements, the panel gathered insights, perspectives and, really importantly, lived experiences, which served as a basis upon which all the recommendations were built. And this very strong participatory approach was instrumental in fostering a sense of ownership and agency among those most involved and impacted by the NDIS. And now the Albanese government is delivering on its commitment to build a strong and sustainable NDIS by providing a further $468.7 million to get the NDIS back on track. And these measures build on the $213.7 million to fight fraud and to co-design NDIS reforms with people with a disability announced earlier this year. And this year's budget will drive the implementation of key recommendations from the independent review. The Getting the NDIS Back on Track bill will firstly provide clarity on who can access the NDIS. It will enable better early intervention pathways for people living with psychosocial disability and children younger than 9 years old with developmental delay and disability, and it will improve how NDIS participant budgets are set, making them more flexible and providing clearer information on how they can be spent. And many of the changes to the scheme will be implemented through the new NDIS rules, which will be put in place following the initial amendments made by the bill. The NDIS rules set out the details of how the scheme operates. Again, those new rules will be co-designed with the disability community, continuing to keep the voices and needs of people with a disability at the heart of all of the NDIS reforms. And at its core, the bill seeks to fortify the foundational pillars of the NDIS, namely access, which is so important, budget setting, and quality and safeguarding. All of these are absolutely needed. Among the reforms envisaged are the delegation of rulemaking powers for priority areas identified by the NDIS review, the conceptualisation of a framework for an early intervention pathway, and the enhancement of transparency and flexibility in the allocation and utilisation of NDIS funds. Moreover, the bill endeavours to strengthen provisions pertaining to expenditure within allocated supports and bolster the efficacy of the NDIS Commission, and that ensures that the participants receive the support they need when they need it most, and that's what it's all designed for. Furthermore, this bill lays the groundwork for fostering a cohesive system of support for individuals with disabilities, comprising of inclusive mainstream services alongside foundational supports. And these changes, all the changes that we have made, are based on the principles of empowerment and inclusivity and are symbolic of an evolution of our NDIS, one characterised by resilience, responsiveness and relevance. And of course, all of these reforms build on the original idea of the NDIS. And for those of us that were here when it was introduced, it was a transformative moment for this Parliament, for our nation, to have such a scheme in place, because, as we know, for many, many years it had been called for, and very proudly it was a Labor government that delivered it, and it's now a Labor government that's getting the NDIS back on track. Now, importantly, through these changes, the government has really highlighted our unwavering commitment to inclusivity and collaboration throughout the whole implementation of what we're doing. The legislative approach adopted in the NDIS Amendment Bill reflects a keen recognition of the imperative to co-design changes to the NDIS rules in partnership with the disability community. By seeking the input, the feedback and expertise from individuals with disabilities, their families, carers and advocates, our government absolutely aims to ensure the NDIS evolves in lockstep with the evolving needs and aspirations of its participants. That is what is at the heart of what we're doing. And all that is proposed in this legislation is backed up by our $468.7 million investment, including $45.5 million to establish an NDIS Evidence Advisory Committee, $20 million to start preliminary consultation and design work to help people with a disability navigate the services, $5.3 million to undertake preliminary work to reform NDIS pricing arrangements, and over $213 million of recently announced funding to fight fraud and co-design NDIS reforms with people with a disability. And it's vitally important to have that massive amount of funds to be fighting any sort of fraud that potentially has occurred. And can I say, Deputy Speaker, in my concluding remarks, this bill, again the NDIS back on track, really represents a real testament to the resilience and resolve of all those that it supports. And I do want to recognise all those that have participated and make sure that their input is heard. We are always listening to the lived experiences of people in all areas, and particularly with redesigning the NDIS, it is vitally important. And we are, all of us, so committed to improving the experiences for all Australians with a disability who interact with the NDIS, as well as their families and carers. And of course, what drove us with that is that the past 10 years, when we did see the underfunding of the NDIS and we did see the lack of commitment from the previous government, we saw and we heard firsthand the problems and it was just devastating, some of the issues and problems that people had, and we absolutely made that commitment. I'm really proud to be here, being part of the government that's delivering upon these reforms. And after that decade of neglect under the Liberals and Nationals government, we can now pave the way for a more equitable, accessible and empowering NDIS, and one that really truly embodies the principles of dignity, choice and autonomy, because that is at the heart of it. People with a disability and their families know they can trust this Labor government to continue to protect the scheme and absolutely get it back on track. Our government's committed to improving outcomes for the participants and ensuring that every dollar of funding goes to those who need it most. That's absolutely imperative. And with this bill and our investments in the budget, our government reaffirms our commitment to leaving no one behind and building a future where every individual can thrive and flourish. And as I said, Deputy Speaker, I am extremely proud to be a part of a Labor government who delivered the NDIS here in this chamber over a decade ago, and now another Labor government that is committed to continue to improve the scheme for the betterment of the Australian people, an absolute commitment. And it is always Labor governments who are on the side of the Australian people and will continue to deliver really life-changing reform and providing all those supports wherever they are required. And in this case, it has been a long time coming, and we are very proud to be in government and to be delivering these absolute changes to the NDIS that are long overdue. And, Deputy Speaker, I certainly commend the bill to the House. It's vitally important that we get the NDIS back on track, and it's the Albanese Labor government that's doing that.
The question is that the amendment be agreed to, and I call the honourable